Welcome to the Life Expansion After 50 live event. Today I'm out here at Sacramento Capitol Park. I'm going to do some footwork drills and talk about neurotransmitter, cognitive and physiological strength. The majority of our cognitive processing is actually physiological. That may not make sense, and that's why if you've watched any of my content, I tend to go over and repeat this concept of the neural pathways, the 11 million bits per second on the processing of the subconscious, that the subconscious is not a mind, it's a network of neurons. And the reason I repeat it is because if I talk to 100 random people, a good portion of them have heard of neural pathways. Some of them know about the 100 billion neurons. Some of them understand things like cognitive bias, but I can't find 1 in 100 that actually think through the lens of neural pathways. What do I mean? So if you agree that 95% of everything we do is done by habit, and you accept that we make about 33,000 decisions a day, and I would argue that out of those 33,000, the majority of them are stimulus response cycles. We're awake about 65,000 seconds, and so every other second we're having one of those quote unquote decisions, which is more like a stimulus response cycle in my view. And given that it's happening that fast, to get your head wrapped around it and understanding that the subconscious processes at 11 million bits per second, once you see that it's the neurons and the energy flowing through the neurons that's creating those stimulus response cycles. It's all associations from the past. Now, the neurons, that's physiological. The energy going through it is not. Myelin, the sheet that wraps the neurons that make the neural pathways more effective, faster, stronger, more accurate, that's physiological. And so while the energy is not, the neural pathways are. And this is why an energy is flowing through them. Now, when you look at synaptogenesis and how the synapse moves away from the inactive neural pathways to move towards the active neural pathways, and that's for efficiency, right? The body's always working to be efficient. That is all physiological, but yet people who agree that 95% is by habit, that we have neurons and neural pathways, etc., it's hard for them to think through that lens, as I was saying, that thinking, for the most part, that 33,000 decisions worth of thinking is not thinking, it's associations. Big difference. Thinking is from the conscious mind. Those things are associations, it's not the same. The reason I'm out here today doing footwork drills is because, I've got to warm up a little bit. The reason I'm out here doing footwork drills is because sprinting is one of the most powerful exercises that we can do to drive things like testosterone, mitochondria, testosterone for men, estrogen for women after menopause, mitochondria, a glutamate, which is the neurotransmitter that transmits the signal from the central nervous system to the neural pathway, and acetylcholine, which is the neurotransmitter that transmits the neural pathway signal to the muscle junction. And then there's the dopamine and the serotonin. So serotonin obviously is feel good, we want to feel good, and then dopamine is the habit one. So even creating the habit of going to the gym regularly, you need neurotransmitter. Now, because the body tends to be efficient and it moves the neurotransmitter away from the neural pathways that aren't being used, basically it's not going to make extra neurotransmitter. So we do several things here. With these footwork drills, they hit the 7 factors that drive neurotransmitter. What does it have to do with sprinting? It's similar to sprinting. The problem is I can only sprint once a week because it requires recovery. It's like doing a max lift. And I was stuck with that, thinking I could only sprint once a week. But now that I understand that a lot of these footwork drills do the same benefits, not to the same degree, but close. And I can do them every day, especially by changing them, because when I change, I don't need the recovery. The 7 factors, it's novelty, something new, and I change up my patterns. I have the basic warm-up patterns are the same, but I change up my patterns every time I go out. 3 times a week I'm doing footwork drills, usually with a weighted vest, but Monday's my sprint day. I'll do time sprints. And so today will be more running exercises rather than pure just footwork exercises. So novelty, intention. I have a specific intention when I'm doing this. I'm either warming up, I'm I'm working on precision, I'm working on speed, I'm working on planting my foot at a certain spot. Like some of these warm-up drills, like if I'm doing ace skips, my objective is to tap the foot down exactly at the cone. Another one, I might be working on my hands. I'm still awkward with my hand. So we got novelty, intention, precision. I just demonstrated a little precision. Balance. Balance comes into play. Sometimes when I'm doing the bounding exercise, like if I'm going to here, you could say that's balance because I'm on one foot for a moment. But a better balance drill is when I'm hopping on one foot. And that's also gets the next one, which is explosiveness. We want to be exploding. And then progression. So progression, I could move the cones around. In this case, what I do is I extend the distance that I'll be running. I'll do some running. I also have a time, so I set up a certain course. You see me sometimes marking off steps because I set the courses up the same way. And that way I can time myself to beat the last time. And the big progression thing I do is I add 1 pound per week to my weighted vest. So the weighted vest started at 4 pounds. I'm adding 1 pound a week, and my objective is I don't add a weight unless I can get my times within a range. So taking the same course, for argument's sake, it takes 42 seconds to do that course. It's picking up and putting down cones, etc., as a footwork drill. Between 40 and 45 seconds is my target. When I add a weight, I want to be able to do that same course within 40 to 45 seconds. That's the progression. That way I know I'm actually stepping up and hitting the numbers at that next weight level. So we already saw the A skips. And because I'm doing this for sprinting, with the A skips, I'm pushing my front foot down, and I'm doing it at the cones. Normally I'll have a longer run, but I wanted to get into this exercise. What's nice about the footwork drills is they give you instant feedback when you mess up, and that's where dopamine comes in and the serotonin. Those come in to help you with the habit formation. So that was a basic warm up there. Now I'm going to do a little more explosive with some bounding. So it's the same principle, except as I go across, I'm trying to get to that last, which I can't do yet. So there's a little bit of explosiveness, a little precision. Now, another warm-up drill might be high knees. So what I'm doing the first part of the live, first 20 minutes or so, is talking about the neurotransmitter, the footwork, the novelty, intention, precision, balance, explosiveness, progression, and struggle. I left off struggle. So you saw some struggling there. I'm struggling. I'm on the edge of my ability, a little away from my ability in some places, but basically you want to be struggling on the edge of ability. You don't want to put yourself into stress mode where you're having too many failures. After I get through the footwork drills and I finish up with some short runs, then I will start talking about the mental area of the 7 fitness areas. Next week, I'll do a live and I'll talk about the physical area. But even though I'm doing physical exercise, I'm going to pull all that together when we talk about the mental area at the end. So high knees. And now we're going to do some shuffling. Do some front crossovers. And now I'm going to do rear foot crossover. All right, so you can see I'm already out of breath. Now, what I'm going to do is start introducing some running. And you could add running to any of these drills, but I'll show you a couple. And again, I try to change it up every week for the novelty. Plus working different neural pathways. We have 100 billion neural pathways. I want to start hitting as many of them as I can. So a basic 4-cone drill is you start, you can shuffle backwards, shuffle, frontwards, shuffle, backwards, shuffle. And you can see these are very short runs. It's only 4 yards, 4 meters or so. It's helping with the sprinting. A big part of sprinting is the start. And I don't practice the start enough. These are great drills to do it. I like to do a variation of this one though, which gives me a little bit more running, and it's going to wind me even more. So I start here, backwards, sprint, shuffle, backwards, sprint, front crossover, back, backwards crossover. So there's a little bit of struggle on the edge of ability. Talking while doing the exercise makes it harder. See how out of breath I am. And that's just what, 3? Yeah, just 3. Another thing that's going on here is that I'm spiking my heart rate, which is good. I'm spiking my breathing, which is good. With our exhaling of breath, according to Daniel Brule in his book, Just Breathe, we are expelling 70% of the toxins in our body. So by spiking my heart rate, I'm breathing deeper. So if you think about, most people breathe shallow in the upper part of their lungs. If you've done any martial arts, Eastern arts, Tai Chi, you know that you want to breathe down into lower abdomen, the spot 2 inches below the belly button. And by breathing down there and then exhaling everything, you're cleaning out the lungs. The way I visualize it is there's matter in there, blood, etc., that's not getting moved around. It's not getting cleansed, even though we're breathing. So if 70% of the toxins in our system are being expelled with exhaling, it makes sense that we deep breathe. And this kind of working out forces it. Sprinting does it. Another big one is the lymphatic fluid. The lymphatic fluid does not have a pump to move it around. It moves around because of exercise. Or movement. It made sense for the hunter-gatherers because they were always walking. They were out hunting and gathering. They moved the lymph around. In a sedentary lifestyle, if we're not moving the lymph around, that means the body's working extra hard to cleanse the blood. We need clean blood. When the body works too hard to get the blood to pH balance, it leaves oxidative waste and it creates inflammation. So a lot of times, so I'm going to say, I'll make this statement, and here's an example of how the research. Let me come back. I want to get this other run in before I recover too much. Here's an example of when you do the research, you have to be careful of these statements that say X doesn't help Y. For example, they'll say, you might read that a high alkaline diet doesn't change the pH level of the blood. It's a true statement. So in this case, the alkaline diet would be the X. The pH balance of the blood would be the Y. So the reason it doesn't impact the pH balance is because the body's doing whatever it needs to do to get the blood to the proper pH level. Following that line of thinking, when you dig deeper, what you find out is that alkaline helps us process toxins. We get more toxins out of our system with urination, waste matter, breathing, like I was saying. It cleans out some of the toxins so the body doesn't have to work so hard to get to the blood level to the proper pH. And because the body's not working so hard to get the blood to the proper pH, there's less inflammation and less oxidative waste. So X may not impact Y directly, but has a direct impact on Z, which is processing toxins. And Z, less toxins, means the body doesn't have to work so hard. Now, if you're a scientist out there, biologist, you can clean that up a little bit for me, help me get it more, because I want to be accurate from the scientific standpoint, but I also want to keep it simple enough for the people who don't care about the science part. They just want to get healthy and have a fulfilling life past 50, 60, 70, 80, even 90. So another example would be inflammation. Left to your own thinking, you might think, well, exercising causes me inflammation, because when I do deep knee bends or whatever, I feel inflammation in my knees. If I get up out of the chair, I feel inflammation. Okay, but watch this. By exercising, we're getting rid of toxins, moving the lymphatic fluid around, it's cleansing the blood. The body doesn't have to work so hard to get the blood to the proper pH. There's less inflammation in the body, which means the body has less inflammation to process, and it can get rid of the inflammation. When I started doing these footwork drills, any inflammation I had went away. And it is what it is. So again, don't take my word for it. You can Google all of this stuff and find out, do your own research, and come up with your model of the world, your view. Starting here, see, if I go there, there. All right. Skip that part. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Backwards. And then backwards on it. That's it. There you go. And then I've been talking about the cognitive piece and how the neurotransmitters is so important. The same kind of activity that drives mitochondria, testosterone for men, estrogen for women after menopause, acetylcholine, dopamine, serotonin, and glutamate. The same kind of exercises that produce improvement there also produces neurotransmitter. And it makes sense because 3 or 4 of them, glutamate, acetylcholine, dopamine, and serotonin, are neurotransmitters. So it's kind of logical that it would do that. If 95% of everything we do is done by habit, and we make 33,000 decisions a day, and of those 33,000 decisions, when we're awake about 65,000 seconds a day, so essentially doing a stimulus response cycle every other second, it makes sense that a lot of that cognitive activity is physiological. If it's physiological, it means we should be able to help it by working on the nervous system. Now, I started studying cognitive biases because I thought where I was heading with cognitive biases was to help people understand how to combat or how to neutralize cognitive biases. Well, it turned out I came up with like 3 dozen that impact us from a success principles or success activities standpoint. And that was too much. It was too much. Well, I'll just give you one example of one. So we all have heard of confirmation bias. I use that example a lot. That's how conspiracy theories work. If I tell somebody 3 things that are undeniably true, they're predisposed to believe the 4th thing I tell them, and they lock it in to where they would need 11 iterations of counter information before they stop believing me as a credible source. That's just confirmation. But the big one that gets us is planning fallacy. Planning fallacy says that we're going to overestimate what we can do next week and the week after. Even in the face of 3 or 4 weeks of missing the target, grossly missing the target, we still have a tendency to think that we can double down and that we're going to make it happen. Planning fallacy is one of the biggest reasons. It's the thing that this time is going to be different. We'll make it work this time. This time I'll get it. Everybody wants to start here. The way to get this thing done is you start with small baby steps in small increments. There's so many distractions, and you have advertisers working 12 hours a day figuring out how to get you to spend money or go here, go there, do things that you weren't planning on doing. And this will be the last one. And then we'll talk a little bit about practical exercise for managing the stimulus response cycle. So this drill is actually one of the ones that's more directly related to sprinting. Again, it's novelty, intention, precision, balance, explosiveness, progression, and struggle. I sprint, and then it's a shuffle, and then I sprint. So this gives me a chance to practice many starts. And eventually I'll start timing myself on this one because I think it's going to have a direct correlation to my sprinting pace. All right, that was sort of an orientation one. Went a little bit hard for orientation. I'm going to add 2 more cones and do at least 1 more set, and then I should say 1 more rep, and call it a day. And this time, so sprinters take off running, their feet are in the blocks, and they're able to push off with both legs. When I do my time sprint runs, I'm not doing that. I'm just starting off from the ground. So I'm not saying this is the perfect way to do it, but the way I do it is I take long, wide steps to get as much push from my leg as possible in the first few steps. The first few steps will be a little bit wider. So I'm going to work on that. It's like pushing off. In other words, instead of taking a full step and only getting a half push, I'm taking a half a step distance, but it's out to the side so I can push off. I think I read that somewhere in Improving Your Sprinting Speed. So here we go. So just 1 more rep. That was all about neurotransmitter production. Novelty, intention, precision, balance, explosiveness, progression, and struggle on the edge of ability. All of those together and individually, but you're stacking them, I'm stacking them. They tell the central nervous system that this is important. The central nervous system not only starts creating and producing more neurotransmitter, because remember, there's all these inactive neural pathways. So you have a neuron and a neuron and a neuron, but the synapses is dry. There's no synapses in the inactive ones. They could be wrapped with myelin and have all this ability, stored up potential in them, but until you put synapses, they're not connecting. So by producing more neurotransmitter, I'm able to put synapse back in these inactive pathways and make them active. This is why when you feel a little awkward at the beginning of the season of a new sport, of revisiting a sport, it's that awkwardness is sometimes just, it's not even muscle, it's just getting the neural pathways activated. This is all about telling the nervous system that this is important. But the other thing that happens is, and this goes all the way back to the hunter-gatherer time, right? You gotta remember, you got a brain that's over 100,000 years old. So the central nervous system takes a forward look, and I'm not using the scientific terminology, takes a forward look and predicts how much activity is going to be in the future, and should it be producing more neurotransmitter to get ready for that. Well, if you are a kind of person who's taking it easy and conserving energy and trying not to go too hard and using the banister to get upstairs and using the arms of the chair to stand up so your knees don't hurt, what you're doing is you're communicating to your central nervous system that less and less and less is going to be needed in the future. And it starts preserving neurotransmitter, because the brain is a hog. 80% of our resting metabolism is just to exist, and the brain using up a quarter of it. So the brain is taking up all this energy. It wants the energy for itself. It's not going to make neurotransmitter for something that's not being used. It works the other way as well. This is why it's progression. This is a perfect example, and it works. Let's say you want to start doing push-ups. Now, the traditional thinking would have you doing push-ups, and you do 3 sets of 25 and 3 sets of 50. You'd be doing push-ups all your life, all day long, just to hit these numbers. Instead, get a band, buy 5 resistance bands, buy 2 packs because they break. If you can do 25 push-ups, go down to 5. Just do 5 solid, really good push-ups, and then add 1 a day, just 1 a day. This is the progression, 1 a day, because it's telling the central nervous system that tougher times are coming, get ready, step up, we need more neurotransmitter. Add 1 a day. When you get to 10, put a heavier band on or add a band, because you get 5 and you could double them up or go to a heavier one. So it's like 1.5, 2, 2.5, whatever you want to do. And I put it around my torso and I'll do 5 and then add 1 a day. I get to 10, depending, sometimes I'll go to 15, depending on how I'm feeling. But 1 a day, just 1 a day, I get to 10. And then I go back with another band, go back to 5. I'm not trying to go to failure. What I'm doing is struggling on the edge of ability. I want it to be hard, but I don't want to be shaking. It's not about going to failure and then needing recovery time. But if you do that for a month, and just 5 to 10, 5 to 10, 5 to 10, then watch how many push-ups you can do without the bands. It'll amaze you, because it's not the muscle that's building up. The central nervous system is throwing the neurotransmitter in there, it's strengthening those neural pathways. You have, imagine how many, if it takes me 1,000 neural pathways just to do a step, imagine how many neural pathways there are to do a push-up. All right, that's enough of that. Now, 7 Fitness Series is a framework I use to help me stay on track when I'm working with somebody and I want to take them through the paces. So the 7 Fitness Series is a framework: mental, physical, spiritual, emotions in the middle, and then relationship, professional, financial. So it's actually on the left side is mental, physical, spiritual, emotions in the middle. The right side is relationship, professional, financial. And the idea is the emotion is the gateway. So this is a be, do, have. It's not have, do, be. We don't start with financial. That's the end. That's the last one, because the first thing we have to do is have agency and personal leadership. And so the 4, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, are in our total control. Emotion is in the middle, as I call it, the gateway, because we can get hijacked. Other people can trigger us. So while it's in our control to respond, sometimes they get the jump on us and then we go off the deep end. You've seen enough videos of people getting triggered. And then after you have agency and personal leadership, now you can go for your relationship, professional, and financial. So every time you do a new quest, you may have to reset and just do a quick cycle, because the habits you had in the past are not the right ones for the habits that you need in the future, for the new quest. Tony Robbins talks about, he uses that incantations, he says setting the identity. It does this, it's the same principle, but I'm doing it with a framework that we could keep coming back to. And when I'm working with a client, it's very easy for me to see where they're missing. And it's like unpeeling an onion. Every time we go to another level, a level up, there's another chink in the armor, another weak link in the chain that gets identified. The mental area is the first one. That's the first line of defense. This is where we have to catch it. So we're familiar with the stimulus response cycle. The stimulus response cycle, for all intents and purposes, happens inside of a half second. You have a stimulus, then there's a reaction, and then there's a response. And most people have just collapsed the response and the reaction into one. So you have a stimulus and you have a response. In fact, they call it stimulus response. It's actually stimulus reaction response, because there's a quarter of a second between the stimulus and the reaction, and another quarter of a second between the reaction and the response, assuming the response is from your conscious mind. If you let the response equal the reaction, then you're taking your conscious mind out of play and you're giving up the power of choice. But before we can even do that, before the stimulus happens, and if we're having 33,000 stimulus response cycles a day, that means we are essentially priming ourselves for the next one. We're constantly priming ourselves. What we're going to do is look at the state of being. Now, there's a mental state of being and a physiological state of being. Both of those could be priming you for fight or flight. The physiological state of being, if you're tired, if you're worn out, if you toxins, dehydrated, remember, dehydration means thick blood. Thick blood moves slowly. That means the brain is not getting the blood and the nutrients and oxygen that it needs, and that primes you for fight or flight. Even something as simple as posture can prime you for fight or flight if it's slumped over like this, defeated. So we've got a physiological state of being or physical state of being, and we have a mental state of being. Obviously, if you're stressed out, overwhelmed, you're angry at this person, you didn't get much sleep, you're compromised mentally. So if we enter into this stimulus response, into the stimulus, if that's the stimulus, and we enter that stimulus in a compromised physiological or mental state of being, the chances of the reaction being good is not real high. And the chances of having a pause between the reaction and the response is not that good. So what happens, we end up stacking the response all in that one place. When we enter into the stimulus from a strong physiological state of being and a strong mental state of being, we can have this reaction. Now, the reactions are almost always survival. The subconscious is primed, is biased for survival. It makes sense. Hunter-gatherer, tigers on the Serengeti, it's worried about survival. Its primary focus is survival. And so 70% of the time, I'm estimating, it's going to look at things as a threat. The unfamiliar is a threat. So think about it. If you're going after a goal, a vision, a purpose, all of that's going to be unfamiliar, and it looks at it as a threat. This is why we have that cognitive dissonance, that brain fog. We're looking for anxiety. Where's the next shoe to drop? I'm scared. What's going on? Because it's anxiety and excitement can have the same signature, and the subconscious is already biased for threats. So naturally, it's going to take this brain fog and assume that it's anxiety, when it's really just the excitement or the cognitive dissonance that you're doing something that you thought you could never do. So what we want to do is arrive to that stimulus at a strong physiological state of being and a strong mental state of being. Now, when we get the reaction, which is a survival reaction, we can also, we have the ability to pause. One is we're not going to let the reaction be 100%. It's only a data point. It's a 20% data point, because why? It's an association from the past. That reaction is a survival reaction from the past, sometimes learned from age 0 to 7. What we're doing today is completely different, in my case, from what I was doing from 0 to 7. So this reaction is probably not the right one. Sometimes it will be, but if I'm doing something new, I'm into a new quest, it's not going to be right, because I haven't done it before. Now, you can create future pace by visualizing, and you can create some associations, but out of scope. For all intents and purposes, this is from the past. What I then need to do is pause, but it's not just a pause. You know, people say, I tried that. It's not a pause. What you're doing is you're waiting for the conscious mind to catch up, and you are letting the subconscious, you can actually train the subconscious to do a quick problem solving first step capability. What's the clearly define the problem? You want the problem clearly defined before it hands off. This is all happening in a half second, from here to here. But I'm not going to spend my time here. This is where I want to talk about it. We have the pre-stimulus phase, and in the pre-stimulus phase, we're going to set ourselves up to be strong physiologically and strong mentally. And next week I'll actually do the stimulus response cycle, but today I want to do the pre-stimulus. So the first thing we have is beliefs. But many of our beliefs were formed from 0 to 7. Many of our beliefs, we had nothing to do with them, and they are from a different time and place, and they're very difficult to address because they're difficult to define and figure out where they're coming from. So we have an exercise so that you can figure out where you got the limiting beliefs, and then you look at the references that were used to come up with that belief, and then you can make a conscious decision. Do you still want to maintain that belief? After the belief, we have to understand what drives neuroplasticity. That's kind of what I've been talking about with the 7 factors. Deep practice is consistent with that. So we want to start living with neuroplasticity and understanding that to know and not do is to not know. And in order to change our behavior, we actually have to change what we do. And the way we change what we do is by changing habit. And habit lives in the neurons, in the neurons and associations. So we got beliefs, we have neuroplasticity, and then we have priming. And we're being primed all the time. Marketing, if you read a sales letter online, and if you ever find yourself like reading and you're getting excited, or maybe you're shopping for something on Amazon and you're reading these things and you're getting excited, that's the dopamine kicking in. The anticipation of the reward is starting to kick in. You're already being primed to want to buy. And on those sales letters, you might even start thinking, well, if it's this price, maybe I'll consider it. If it's below this price, maybe I'll consider it. And you're getting excited and you think it'll happen. This is why so many supplements that people buy never get opened. Courses that people buy never get opened, because the dopamine was satisfied. It's the anticipation of the reward, and by making the purchase, the reward it's good. It's done. And then people don't even go back and open the supplements. And it's also why the placebo effect can work with supplements. So there are supplements out there. You know, doctors very quick to tell you supplements don't do anything. You're wasting your money. I'm not going to say that's all the way true, but I think there's some of that direct, indirect stuff going on. But also I do think that some supplements work because of the placebo effect. And then the last one is mindset. And this is about maintaining a growth mindset. But understand that a growth mindset, you can get knocked into a fixed mindset very quickly. And you can be a person who has a growth mindset, but because something triggers you, you slip into a fixed mindset. And in a fixed mindset, it's very hard to have agency and personal leadership because you don't see some of the possibilities. So we have beliefs and neuroplasticity, priming, mindset, and in the middle, I'll put the physiology, because physiology is so important. It's the neurotransmitters, it's the posture, it's the deep breathing and the clean blood. All of that has to do with the pre-stimulus. And by having a strong pre-stimulus, I now arrive at my stimulus from a position of strength, physiological state of being and my mental state of being. And now I have a shot at taking those 33,000 decisions and have them on the right path instead of the wrong path. I'll add one thing in here because I said I wanted to make it practical. So we're going to talk about this next week. But for now, if you do 2 things in the morning, yes, I 100% believe in rituals and routines in the morning. However, I think there's a distinction between routines that work during a project phase versus routines that work during an operational phase. My routines and rituals when I'm in project mode and creating are different than my routines and rituals when I'm in operational mode. And I think too often these rituals are put out there and people are trying to do them, and there's only meant to be done for 90 days. I remember having debates about the 90-91 versus the one thing. both of those books, you may be familiar with them. I look at the 90-91 as more of an operational thing, and the one thing is more of a project thing. That's just an example. But here's 2 things you can do. First thing in the morning, you want to drink a liter of water, and you can work up to it. Start with 8 ounces and add a couple of ounces a day. Pretty soon you'll be surprised how quickly you get to a whole quart or a liter. So drink a liter of water. This is important because our blood is thick. We're dehydrated from sleeping, from 8 hours without having any liquid. The brain is starving for nutrients and oxygen. The blood is too thick to get it there quickly. The brain is going to start depriving other organs of nutrients and oxygen because it wants its fix. So by drinking water, the blood thins very quickly, and you'll see that brain fog lift even before you have a cup of coffee. Just sit there and for 5 minutes, just practice slow breathing. You could either do box breathing, 4 counts, inhale, hold that for 4 counts, exhale for 4 counts, hold that, exhale for 4 counts, and then repeat. So that's going to give you 4 breath cycles a minute. Box breathing is great. Something even easier, you can start with 4 counts in, 4 counts out, and I would challenge you every day for a week, just add 1 count. So start out 4 counts in, 4 counts out, then the next day 5 counts in, 5 counts out, the next day 6 counts. You'll be surprised, and you'll see how the central nervous system makes it easier. You'll get to 10 and it'll be effortless. You'll go from 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you'll be at 10 and it's effortless. At 10, in and out, that's 3 breaths per minute, right? 10 counts in, 10 counts out. That's 20 seconds. That's three breath cycles per minute. By practicing that, what you're doing, remember the stimulus response? What you're doing is you're giving yourself the ability to pause very easily between the reaction and the response. You don't want your reaction and your response to be equal. You want the reaction, and then you want the response to be something that you come up with consciously. I can say more about it. We'll talk about it next week. But so if you do this, start working on beliefs, neuroplasticity, priming, mindset, and your physiology, diet, nutrition, hydration, posture, breathing, walking, exercise, to arrive at your stimulus from a position of strength physiologically and mentally. And the next week we'll talk about stimulus response cycle. So we'll see you next week.